Hey, good morning everybody, and welcome to our webinar today about how to simplify SAP role administration using the Xiting Authorization Management Suite, or XAMS. My name is Michael Kummer. I'm with Xiting and responsible for sales and marketing. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is going to be recorded, and you should receive an email with a link to the recording within 24 hours. If you don't, let me know, send me an email, and I'll make sure to send you the link directly. But GoToWebinar is typically very reliable in sending those out. Also, if you have any questions during the webinar, you have two options. One is to type in your question in the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. The other option is to raise your hand through the control panel as well, and if you raise your hand, that's an indication for me that you may want to ask your question directly, so I can unmute you and you can ask your question and we can answer it directly. Or again, if you prefer not to talk, then please type in your question in the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. I'm going to have a couple of breaks during that webinar. We're going to take approximately 45 minutes, but I'll try maybe every 15 minutes or so to take a quick break and have a look at the questions box and see if I see any raised hands or any questions, and if so, we'll address them right there. If not, then we'll have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar as well. So with that being said, let's get started. Here is today's agenda. First, I'll tell you a little bit about Xiting, who we are and what we do. Then we'll talk about some of the challenges that are associated with a, if you will, typical role redesign project. We are going to introduce the Xiting Authorization Management Suite, or XAMS. So whenever I say XAMS, that's what I mean. And then at the end, we'll have a couple of links, more information, a video that may be useful as a follow-up item. And as I said, we will have a questions, time for some questions at the end there as well. So Xiting was founded in 2008 by SAP security experts. We are headquartered in Switzerland, in Zurich. We have about 50 employees, and we have offices in Germany, Switzerland, of course, England, and the United States. Here in the US, we are based out of Tampa, Florida, and most of our senior consultants are also SAP trainers. So we have a very close relationship with SAP education. We develop and deliver a number of training classes for and with SAP. So if you go to training.sap.com, you'll find some of our courses that we developed and we deliver for SAP. We have 4 focus areas. One is certainly around roles and authorizations, and that's going to be one of the major topics for today's webinar. We also have an area around SAP security concepts and how to automate SAP security audits, and we'll see some of that towards the end of the webinar as well. Right now, it's a very hot topic for us, and that's the S/4HANA migration. So SAP is obviously pushing S/4HANA, and we have a number of solutions that can help you automate that migration, especially from a roles and authorizations perspective. We have a separate webinar coming up that specifically deals with the S/4HANA migration, so you may want to check that out as well. And then we also deal with scanning of custom ABAP code, and we'll see some of that in this webinar as well, especially how it pertains to a role redesign project and optimizing SU24. We're not going to go into details about the reasons for role optimization or redesign projects. Most of you are certainly familiar with the reasons. You may be upgrading your SAP system. You may be migrating to S/4HANA. There may be organizational changes. Or you may want to simplify the administration of roles and authorizations. You may want to simplify testing and reduce the risk during go-live. So there are a number of reasons why it may make sense to take a closer look at your existing role concept and find opportunities to optimize that. The problem whenever you decide to do a role redesign are that there are certain tasks involved that are very time consuming, risky, costly, and those are typically the reasons why companies try to not do a role redesign. And so let's step through a more or less typical role redesign and the specific steps involved, and I'll point out where there are issues and opportunities to save time. So when you start a role redesign project, you very often start with an SU25 upgrade. So you take SAP's latest proposals and make sure they get into SU24, your proposals database. You may run a trace and statistical data analysis to find out exactly what users were doing in the system, so you can build roles that are based on what users really need versus what you think they may need. And then comes the first very time-consuming step, and that is creating a spreadsheet with all the users and the corresponding roles, and you try to connect them and make sense of that. You may go to the business to get their input as well to see what roles business users need. The problem with that is that business users very often do not know what technical roles they need. They certainly know what they need to get their job done, but how that translates into technical roles, they don't know. So someone has to bridge that gap, and you do that in that spreadsheet. So you spend a lot of time and money ultimately on coming up with a spreadsheet that at the end is still unreliable to a certain degree and incomplete, but you do the best you can. And then it's your role admin's job to build out those roles according to the spreadsheet in PFCG, and that's obviously a manual process as well. You have to maintain your org fields. If you have a number of roles that are more or less identical but only differ in org fields, you have to create duplicate roles, maintain the org fields in each of those roles, and then you go into testing, and you obviously test in your test or queue environment. And there as well you have to invite your business. You may pick key users who help you with testing, and you write your test scripts and you ask your testers to follow those scripts and try to find out if the roles that you built work. But a test script is certainly never as good as your users doing work in the production system. So there is very often a gap between what users are doing and what your testers are testing. And so that's time consuming as well. And then at some point when you think you've completed your testing and you're happy with the results, you cross your fingers and you go live. And then very often you end up with typical war room scenarios where you have your role admin sitting in a room during go live, taking calls from users as they get stuck, fixing stuff what needs to be fixed, creating delta roles manually, all in an attempt to get users going again and to prevent your business users from being stuck and unproductive. And if you've listened to what I've said, you probably could identify already a number of potential issues, and my goal today is to show you how you can mitigate or resolve some of those issues and how to automate many of those time-consuming tasks. And so that's really the reason why we developed the Xiting Authorizations Management Suite, or XAMS. It has the simple goal to automate time-consuming tasks, to simplify role design, maintenance, testing, to help you with vulnerability scanning of your custom ABAP code, to make sure you're not missing any authorization checks, and the ones that you have are properly proposed in SU24. And we also help you with automating security audits, so you can use the XAMS in preparation for an audit, or in between audits, to make sure that your system is properly set up, configured, and in compliance with your own security concept. The key benefits of the XAMS are, and I've already mentioned some of those, to simplify role testing. That's probably the cornerstone of the XAMS, to help you test new roles without distracting your business users and your testers. We can also help you to optimize RFC interfaces, and we can do that risk-free and in production. We can help you with basically giving you the capability of derived roles, but for org fields. So we can help you to mass replicate roles across org fields, and we do that using a module called the role replicator. We can help you to automatically optimize your SU24 to make sure you have solid proposal that really helps when you create new roles and prevents you or reduces the risk of adding manual authorizations. We can reduce the risk during go live, so you don't have those war room scenarios I've mentioned before. And we reduce the risk of SAP security audits. And so that's in a nutshell what the XAMS does. And I'm going to go through each of the 7 modules that make up the XAMS and tell you what they can do and how they can address some of those pain points that I've mentioned before. So we start with the role profiler. The role profiler is meant to help you analyze your existing role concept. The role profiler consists of roughly 90 reports that you can run against your existing roles. You can make a role selection and then run those reports, and we tell you how good those roles are. If there are issues in there, we help you with optimizing your SU24 based on your existing roles, etc. The next one is the ABAP Alchemist. It's a classic AboveCodeScanner that can be used as a developer tool, certainly, but from a role redesign or security perspective, we use it to find missing authorization checks in your code and to optimize existing authorization checks and to compare your custom code or the authorization checks therein with SU24 to make sure all the auth checks that you do in your custom code are properly proposed in SU24. Then we give you the ability to virtually design new roles based on statistical trace data. And we allow you to virtually assign your new roles and see how well those roles would work before they even exist in the system. And we go into more details on the role designer, so you can exactly see what it does and how it does it. Then we have the role builder, and the role builder is our testing module that allows you to test new roles in production, as crazy as that may sound, without negatively impacting the user and without having to take anything away from your users. And I'll also show you how that works so you fully understand the benefits of that approach. And then we have exciting times, and that's our solution for go live. We call it protected go live, where we can reduce the risk in case a user gets stuck because of a missing authorization. We also have the role replicator. I've mentioned that one before, that can help you to mass replicate roles across what we call org sets. So it's similar to the derived role concept, but specifically meant for org fields. And then last but not least, we have the security architect. That's our solution to automate security audits for SAP. And then we have a number of free tools that you can request. Certainly, you can send me an email afterwards and ask for a download link. One is the user logging tool. It's a very convenient little tool that allows you to schedule user logging and unlocking. So if you have a maintenance window starting at 11 p.m. that ends at 5 a.m., instead of having to sit in front of the computer to log users at 11 p.m. and unlock them at 5 a.m., you can schedule that. So you can sleep instead of doing boring administrative tasks. And then we have the stock take tool, which we typically use to estimate the effort of a role redesign, of an RFC optimization project. So it gives you a report of your RFC landscape, basically, and the associated technical users. But let's start with the role profiler. Again, role profiler is meant to analyze your existing role concept for quality and robustness, and it helps you with optimizing SU24. So here on the right-hand side, you see a number of those report categories. The first one, expanded, is about role quality and sustainability, so we can check your roles for manual authorizations, open authorizations, changed authorizations, etc. We can test your derived roles and check them. We can make most of those reports part of your transport system. That's very important because we consider, or when we look at a role concept, we first make sure to get clean, to do the redesign, but then you want to stay clean. You want to make sure that whatever you have changed and optimized stays in a decent quality and doesn't get contaminated again by the manual authorizations and stuff that role admins may do over time. So we can make most of those reports part of a transport mechanism. Whenever your transport changes up, before the transport gets released, we run those reports, or the reports you select, and we tell you maybe if your newly created roles don't follow your naming convention, if they have open authorizations, etc. I'm going to skip forward here to a more extensive but still incomplete list of those reports, and I want to point out some of them. I've already mentioned the role, the naming convention compliance, so we can check if your roles comply to your own naming convention. We can do SU24 optimization. We can not only tell you what proposals are missing in SU24, we allow you to update your SU24 right from the report. And I'm going to show you an example in a screenshot here in a bit. We have the ability to scan all your display or read-only roles and tell you if they have more than read-only access, or if you have roles that have or lead to HR access, or critical authorizations, or to master data, etc., etc. We also have the ability to do role versioning. So whenever you make a change to a role, we create a version for that, and that allows you to easily revert back to a previous version if you're not happy with your changes. We also have a number of HANA and S/4HANA reporting capabilities, so we can scan your existing roles and point out how compatible that role concept is with S/4HANA. Because as you may know, the data model in S/4HANA has changed. Many transactions don't exist anymore. Others have been consolidated into a new transaction. Let's say, I think FD02 is now BP in S/4HANA. So we can tell you what's going to change. And later on in Role Designer, we can even make that migration for you. If you're planning on migrating to S/4HANA, let us know. We can certainly help you with that. And there are a number of other reports available, but I want to point out two. One is the critical authorizations watchdog. So up here in the role selection, I've selected a number of my Z roles and I've executed the critical authorizations watchdog, and I got a list of roles that have critical authorizations. And so in case you wonder, yes, that's somewhat in competition with SAP Access Control. We deliver this report for those customers who do not have access control. If you have it, we certainly integrate with that as well. But if you don't, then you can run that report right from here. And we give you a list of those critical authorizations. It's behind that report is a customizing table that you can change and add on to. If you have custom transactions that you consider critical, you can add them. But basically, without any modification or customization, we show you the number of critical authorizations. If you double-click on that number here, we give you a detailed list of what the critical authorizations are. Here's the authorization ID, as we have it in our table, and an explanation of what that is. So that's very easy to find critical authorizations in roles. The next one is a very classic SU24 optimization report about S-Tabu-Nam, S-Tabu-Dis. So whenever you have roles with table access, we tell you if the table group or the table name are proposed in SU24. So you can see S-Tabu-Dis, S-Tabu-Nam, or S-Tabu-Kla even. And obviously you don't want to have both the name and the group proposed all the time. But if none is proposed, that's certainly a strong indication that there is room for optimization. And so our recommendation would be to add at least one of those two. Very often it may be the table group to SU24, and you can do it right from here. There are two errors for S-Tabu-Dis and S-Tabu-Nam. If you double click on them, we automatically update SU24 based on that missing proposal. You can certainly also drill down into SU24 directly to see exactly what's going on if that's what you want to do. But that's a very helpful and easy way of updating and optimizing your SU24. And we have a number of other reports that work in a very similar fashion. Next module in the list is the ABAP Alchemist. I've already mentioned it's our custom AboveCodeScanner, and it's for the most part a developer tool to write better code and to reuse existing code, existing or standard BAPIs that SAP may provide for functionality that you want to develop, but we can also use it as a security tool. So here in the screenshot, what you see is a so-called ad hoc inspection or ad hoc scan, where you can select the object type you want to scan. And from a security perspective, that's maybe a role, maybe a transaction, maybe a program. So you select the type you want to scan, you select the object name, and then you select the finding patterns. And you can, again, scan for a number of different things. Most are relevant for developers, but some, like the authority check, are certainly relevant from a security perspective. So you check the finding patterns, you select the depth, so whenever your program has an include or jumps off to another program, we can follow that call stack up to a certain level that you can define here, and you can put any number in that you want to. Just know the higher the number and the deeper the call stack that we have to follow, the longer the scan takes, obviously. And we use the ABAP Alchemist very often as part of a role redesign to optimize SU24. So in the next screen here, you see the findings, and you can slice and dice the view or the data depending on who you are. A developer may look at the findings or the call stack with findings, etc. From a security perspective, there are two views that are most interesting to you. One is the authority checks, and the other one is the authority checks including SU24. So here again, we see authorization checks in your custom code that are not proposed, where neither the object nor the field nor the value are proposed in SU24. So you can, the second half here of the findings. And we allow you to automatically update SU24 based on those findings. So that's very useful for your custom code to make sure that whenever you create roles for custom code, you get the right proposals right into the role instead of having to add them manually, which obviously poses the risk of you forgetting, right? Next one is the role designer, and after this one we're going to have a short break to see if there are any questions, but I would like to finish the role designer first. The role designer allows you to virtually design and model a role concept that's based on statistical trace data, and more specifically we can use ST03N data for that. So it's based on usage data with the goal of building roles that contain what users actually need versus what you think they may need. We help you with role definition. We have certain templates that you can just load. If you say, I have a basis admin and you don't know exactly what transactions you need for such a base role, you can load a template, of course. You can even load existing roles from PFCG and compare or see how they compare with the trace data to see if you have maybe a surplus in certain roles, a surplus of transactions that the users never use, etc. So this is how the design view looks like, and I have already loaded in my trace data. And if you wonder, well, how much trace data do you need? We typically recommend 3 to 6 months, but I also understand that many SAP systems are not set up to retain that much data. So what we can do is, if your system is, let's say, set up for 1 month of trace data, then we can load it 1 month, and a month later we load another month, etc., until we have enough to get a good understanding of your user activity in the system. And once you've loaded your consolidated data, and we obviously put it into our own table space, then you see a list of all the transactions that are part of the trace on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you see a list of users and their assigned roles, if you already have assigned some. And in the middle, you can either load existing roles from PFCG, or, excuse me, you can create new roles and then drag and drop over T-codes from the left. Now, of course, that ungrouped list of T-codes is not very useful in many cases. So you can group that up here with that button, maybe by user or by application component, etc. So you can slice and dice the view how you see fit, and then drag and drop either a user over, and that would mean all the transactions that a particular user executed would come over into that role. And then you can drag and drop roles over from the middle pane to users. And immediately you see on the right-hand side here the coverage percentage. So you see how many transactions a certain user executed, part of the trace, how many the user is still unauthorized for based on that virtual role assignment, and what the coverage percentage is. So that allows you to very easily drag and or build a base role concept that covers users properly. Obviously, this is all based on T-codes. We are not dealing with authorization objects, fields, and values yet, but at least from a T-code perspective, we can give you a good idea, or you can get a good understanding of how well certain roles would work for users without those roles existing in PFCG yet. But once you're happy with your virtual design, you can push a button and we generate those roles in PFCG for you. So you don't have to do that manually. From here, we could also reach out to SAP Access Control if you have it, or use our own built-in SOD engine to test those virtual roles for SOD conflicts. And here is the screen that shows you, or more specifically here, a button up here or one at the end here to generate those roles in PFCG if you're happy with your virtual model. We also have a reports view, and from here you can analyze users, SOD conflicts and stuff, reach out to access control or use our own built-in engine. We can generate roles, as I've mentioned before. But I would also like to point out a number of those reports we have that can help you to further tune your role. So we can, for instance, say, okay, if we see that the user has a surplus based on the current virtual role assignment, we can say carve out those T-codes into smaller roles. So that builds a role with all the T-codes the users needs and removes the ones that are a surplus to prevent someone getting over-authorized. We can also analyze the user utilization of roles, and that's useful if you have existing roles that you load in from PFCG to see how well they actually work. You can find better fitting roles for users. So you can say, give me or find me a role that has the same coverage percentage, but less authorization, so less of a surplus, if you will. You can also select a group of users, maybe your finance guys, and say, build me a role that has all the transactions that they have in common. So that allows you to build a base role for certain groups, etc., etc. So there's a ton of capability in here to allowing you to build new roles that properly fit your users based on what they are doing and have been doing in the system. So before we go to the next one, let's have a quick break here and see if there are any questions. So again, some people joined late, but if you have a question, you can use the questions box on the right-hand side in your GoToMeeting control panel or wherever you move the control panel to, or you can raise your hand, and that's for me an indication to unmute you so you can ask your question directly. If we don't have any questions, then I'll just move on and we'll try again in a couple of slides or then towards the end of the presentation. So up until now, we've covered, yes, there is one question. And the question is this tool written in ABAP? Yes, excellent question. And yes, it is. It's an ABAP-based tool. That means it's installed via a simple transport and uninstalled via transport. It's all standard ABAP. We use only standard APIs and BAPIs. We don't modify any of SAP's code. So it's a very clean install and uninstall, but yes, it's an ABAP-based tool that has some implications from a role design perspective, of course. So as you can probably tell or could tell so far, it's very much transactional based. So we can do a lot of things with transactional systems, but we also have the capability via RFC to reach out to some of the non-ABAP systems, especially with our security architect, and I'll cover that in a bit once we get there. But yes, it's an ABAP-based tool. Okay, then let's move on until we get another question a bit later maybe. So up until this point, we've analyzed our roles. We have virtually designed roles. We have scanned our custom code. And we may have built only template roles using the role designer. And now we get to replicating those roles. So you may be using derived roles to handle identical roles, and with the advantage of if you have to add a T-code at some point, you add it once to a parent role and you distribute the changes to all the children. But what about organizational fields? You know, those are typically harder to maintain, meaning that whenever you want to add a company code, let's say, you have to go role by role, even if you do it in the org field level, and add a company code. And we have a solution for that to simplify that task, and we call it Role Replicator. And the Role Replicator allows you to virtually model your organization. Could be based on location, like in my example here, could be based on business unit or anything else, and any combination thereof, certainly. And what you can do is you can create a org set group, in my case here Asia. I can create an org set representing a country, and then I can assign standard org fields or anything that has been elevated to an org field, and I can assign it to the org set. And I may have different org sets with different org fields, of course, and then I can assign a template role to one of the org sets and mass replicate that role across all the other org sets in the group. So the advantage of that is that I can, and by the way, the roles that we create and replicate are actually single roles in the system, which makes maintenance going forward a little bit easier, but they all come together in our tool, so to say. The advantage of that is if you at some point say, you know what, I don't want to use the XAMS anymore, you can just continue working with the roles. There is nothing fancy or special that we do with our tool. It's standard single roles in the system. You can also use that with an existing derived role concept, by the way. So there's nothing preventing you from doing that, so you get the benefit or the benefits of both worlds, the derived role concept and then the replication with based on org fields. So once you have replicated roles, and let's say someone then goes into PFCG and makes a change to a role manually, it happens all the time, but in here you can see the status. You can see if your roles are in sync between PFCG and your model in Role Replicator, and if they are not, that's indicated here with that yellow triangle. That means out of sync. You can click on compare and see exactly what the differences are down to the field level, and you can click on sync and we override any changes that someone may have done manually. At the same time, if you ever have to add a company code, you know, manually or if you have to add a company code somewhere, you do it once in here and you click on synchronize, and we would synchronize the change down to all the affected roles. So you only have to do it once and not role by role as you would have to do it without Role Replicator. Next one is the Role Builder, and that's probably our most unique and innovative technology that we call productive test simulation. As the name implies, we allow you to test new roles in production without affecting users at all. And let me show you how it works. So what we have here, we have our dialog user with the current role assignment. So here in SU01, you see all the roles the person has assigned. What we do is we create a reference user for this dialog user, and you can certainly do that in batch, so you don't have to do it one by one and manually. But let's say you have a couple of dialog users you want to test. You create those reference users using our tool, and then you assign your newly created roles to the reference user, not to the dialog user, to the reference user. So at that point, if you want to visualize that, you have a dialog user with an assigned reference user and the new roles in the backpack, so to say. At the same time, the user still has the old role, so we didn't take anything away, and that's important because that means we don't impact that user in production at all. Otherwise, you would not be doing that in production. So once we have that user set up, we have a dialog user with a reference user assigned. The new roles are assigned to the reference user. Thanks to a change that SAP did for us a couple of years ago, whenever the SAP kernel performs an authorization check, it does it against the reference user first, and only then against the dialog user. So let's use a simple example. We have a basis guy who has SE16 access as part of the old roles. As part of the new roles, we forgot to add SE16. Was, simple mistake, we forgot it. And so at that point, the user doesn't have SE16 anymore. If that user were to go into SE16, the SAP kernel would perform an authorization check against the reference user. That check would fail and produce an error code. But the check against the dialog user would succeed, so the user wouldn't be impacted at all. But as a result, we get a list of those error codes or return codes in our log that we can pick up. And return code 0 means the auth check against the reference user failed, but was successful against the dialog user. So no impact to the user, but a clear indication for us that there is something missing in the new roles. And that could be either something that we forgot or something that we took away intentionally. Now, if it's something we forgot, we go back to dev, we fix the role, we transport those changes up, and those error codes would go away over time. If it's something that we took away intentionally, then we would simply hide that particular error so it doesn't clutter up our log. And so that shadowing process, you simply let run for a couple of months, and at some point, you won't have any more error codes in the log, and that's for you a clear indication that the roles that you have built work for your users. There are no more, like, quote-unquote, failed authorization checks, and the roles they have, as well as the new ones, work for what they are doing. And at that point, you can go live. Before we jump to our go live, I want to point out something else. Second capability, just in case you wonder what that color coding here means. We also have the ability, using Role Builder, to automatically create delta roles for missing authorization checks. And of course, you wouldn't want to do that in production. That's really meant as a tool for testers. So if you have your queue environment and your testers are doing their thing and they come across a failed auth check, instead of having to wait for the role admin to fix whatever needs to be fixed, the tester can simply try again, and without a split second, we have created a delta role, assigned it to the tester, and the tester can continue working. And we would only do that for authorization objects that are on our whitelist, and that's indicated here in green. We would not do that for what's on the blacklist, and both lists you can certainly maintain and customize. And then everything in between without the color, or that's shown here in gray, that's up to you to decide how you want to handle those. But that's really meant as a tool to increase the productivity of your testers, not meant for production, with one exception. If you do an RFC optimization project and you have RFC interfaces that only exist in production, you've done your shadowing using our productive test simulation, you've done all the stuff to build roles that perfectly fit that interface, there is still a slight risk that that interface may be missing something, and you certainly don't want that interface to break, because that could mean production standstill, for instance. So for that exact use case, you could use that capability, the automatic role building capability, in production for RFC interfaces. And we have some customers that do that because they say it's worth the risk building roles in production if in return we can be certain that the interface does not break. And so that's the only exception, really. Otherwise, it's certainly meant as a tool for testing. Any questions here before we move on to the last two modules of the XAMS? Okay, good. So apparently everything is clear. I like that. Next one, exciting times. Exciting times is a solution that reduces the risk during go live. So compared to our productive test simulation, here we flip the switch, or the roles, if you will. So during go live, your dialog users obviously have the new roles, because that's what you go live with. But at the same time, we assign the old roles to the reference user, and we disassociate the reference user with the corresponding dialog user. We just let it sit there, but it's not assigned to the dialog user. But if you run into any, or if the user runs into an issue, let's say again our SE16 example, despite our best efforts, we forgot to give our basis guy SE16. He absolutely needs it. He should have it, but he doesn't have it anymore. And so during the course of his daily work, SE16 doesn't work anymore because it's missing. Instead of having to open a ticket or call the role admin or do whatever, that whatever it takes to get back that missing authorization and wasting time in the process, the user can simply go to a self-service transaction and say, hey, give me my old roles back, or more specifically, give me my reference user that has my old roles assigned for the next hour. And you can certainly define the maximum time spent in the background. You can build a workflow around that. You can say someone has to pre-approve before the assignment takes place, or, which is what we would recommend, someone approves it after the fact. So it's somewhat similar to Firefighter. For those of you who use Firefighter, you know the concept of emergency access management. This is, even though it can be used for classic Firefighter use cases, it's really meant to give back access, previous access, instead of to elevate that. So you can contain the risk and limit the risk and exposure to the old roles the user had before, instead of giving more than what the user ever had, right? So the user can go in, say, here is my reason why I need my reference user, I need it for the next hour, and then the assignment takes place immediately. And once we have reached the session limit, either the one defined on the backend or defined by the user, we automatically take away that reference user. So you cannot forget to do that. And that gets the user going immediately without having to wait for a role admin to fix whatever needs to be fixed during go live. And that's really what gets away with that war room scenario I've mentioned initially, because you don't need any role admin sitting around waiting for users to call. Users can help themselves very easily. We use, for both the concepts I've mentioned before, standard SAP reference users. So during one of those sessions, if you were to go into SU01 and go into roles, you would see that reference user assignment right there. Last but not least, Security Architect. Security Architect is meant to automate security audits or to help you prepare for an upcoming audit. And I'm going to skip forward to the UI here right away. So the Security Architect is, or delivers, ready-to-use security concepts for certain SAP systems and application and modules. More specifically, we deliver concepts for ERP, for NetWeaver Java, for Solution Manager, Identity Management, HCM, GRC, single sign-on, and HANA as a database. And a concept is nothing more than a written document. It's, at the end of the day, a PDF. And you can generate a PDF right here and have it as a reference printed out maybe. You can change or add on to the concept, so you can add your own chapters. You can rearrange those chapters. You can change them. We use a very simple markup language to create those concepts. Obviously, you want to change variables like default company, etc. So it's personalized to you. You can change coloring, everything you can change. You can install this, but you don't have to, on Solution Manager, and that is the advantage that all your connected systems would show up right here under the systems on the left-hand side here. So you can test your systems against the concept, and then every concept chapter or area comes with a number of checks that you can perform. And those are really the classic checks that every auditing firm would do. In fact, we've worked with EY and PwC in Europe and SAP to create those documents. So they contain really all the checks that your EYs and PwCs and KPMGs of the world would perform during an SAP security audit. The advantage is it's all built here into software and available through the push of a button. So you can select the checks you want to perform. We certainly keep a check history, and that allows you to compare previous checks, so you can see if you have improved between that check last year or the audit last year and this year. And the test results we can show you in line with the document, so you see the context of that particular check, or you can show it as a table. And I'm going to show it to you as a table. I think I have some system settings here that I've tested. I have one demo system in 2 clients, and red indicates here I failed the check. Green means I passed it, and yellow means there is a warning and certainly something I want to check out. But here is a simple list of system settings and security settings that we test for, and you can drill down. You can double click on a specific one and you get more details, like in this particular case, password parameters in your instance profile, right? So you can say what, or you can see what the current parameter value is on the system, on our demo system here, and what the expected parameter is based on the concept. And obviously you can change those in the concept, so the expected parameters would match whatever your requirements are. But then we would give you an idea here of where you failed. And that's really a helpful tool, as I said before, to either prep for an audit, maybe do an audit in between audits, like if every year or every 18 months or 24 months your auditor comes in, maybe halfway you run the test yourself to see if you have improved compared to the findings from the last audit, and if you're still on track and don't have any major issues that the auditor may find next time. And that was in a nutshell the XAMS and how it can help you to simplify and automate many of the time-consuming tasks associated with role administration, redesign, testing, etc. Specifically for the RFC optimization that I've mentioned throughout the presentation a few times, there is an OSS note where SAP recommends using the XAMS, because that's really the only risk-free and reliable way of deauthorizing RFC interfaces, and SAP Consulting is using the XAMS for exactly that as well. So here is the OSS number if you want to read up on that. We also have a very good video on our YouTube channel that's more on a high level to point out the benefits of the XAMS and typical use cases. And with that being said, I would like to open it up for questions. And while I do that, I'm going to show here my contact information. So in case there is anything, any questions that you want to ask me maybe later, or anything that you think about in the next couple of days, feel free to shoot me an email. But if there is anything right now, please either raise your hand in the GoToMeeting control panel or type in your question. If I don't hear anything, that's a very clear indication for me that everything was super easy to understand, which is, I certainly appreciate that. Or it was super boring and nobody cares. We will probably never find out. But again, with a recording of this, and you'll get an email with a link to the recording within 24 hours from GoToWebinar. So with that being said, I thank you very much for attending, and thanks for spending an hour here with me almost. We are 9 minutes short, so I'll give you 10 minutes back of your day. Hope you appreciate that. And again, thank you very much. And if you have any questions otherwise, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, and we can always jump on a separate call. All right, thank you very much.